Let us bring in Scott Snyder. He's a senior fellow for Korean Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, and he joins me now from Washington. Thanks so much for joining me, Scott. So let's talk about the message that the vice president delivered this morning from the demilitarized zone, telling North Korea that the era of strategic patience is over. What do you think he meant by that? What are the implications?
Well, clearly the main message is that the Trump administration wants to deal with the North Korea issue with a greater sense of urgency. Time is not on the U.S. side as North Korea continues to develop a capability to launch a missile that could reach the United States within the next 4 years. And the Trump administration is recognizing the seriousness of this issue and projecting a desire to really change North Korea's strategic environment in such a way that they will move in a different direction.
We also heard from the vice president something that really sounded a bit like a threat. He referenced the U.S. military actions in Syria and in Afghanistan, and there was a warning to North Korea not to test President Trump. Do you think this sort of message is effective?
Well, the North Koreans have already rejected that message in their own media. I think the message is more effective with allies as a signal of resolve, but the North Koreans clearly, I think, see their situation as different, and also the level of impact of a single strike on Syria is quite different from the scope of the challenge of dealing with North Korea.
Right. You know, Mike Pence also said that, look, all options are on the table. We've sort of heard this before, but are there any options we haven't tried that will actually be effective? It seems like the policy has been sanctions, and they work to a certain degree, but not enough to stop any aggression coming out of North Korea. In fact, it's sort of a game, at least in the past, that North Korea, you know, there's a provocative move from North Korea in exchange for maybe negotiations on sanctions. It's almost part of the dance now, isn't it?
Well, there has been a sense of a scripted nature in terms of the U.S. DPRK interaction. The new thing over the weekend, I think, was North Korea's failed missile test, where there are reports that the U.S. used cyber capabilities in order to induce that failure. And the DPRK, in its own media, actually referred to possible actions by hostile outside forces, which actually gives greater credibility to the possibility that some sort of interference might have occurred. Now, that sort of action is really just a kind of stalling action to buy time. There still is a necessity for a comprehensive and holistic strategy to be applied over time in order to really be able to turn this around. And it's not clear that it's going to be able to be resolved in a peaceful fashion.
And it seems like a huge component in that strategy, at least put forth by the Trump administration, is to depend on China to put pressure on North Korea. But I want to ask you what you make of the transactional approach that President Trump has been taking with China. You know, he tweeted yesterday that, you know, it wouldn't make sense to label them a currency manipulator since they're working with us on North Korea. Now, clearly he wasn't thinking about that during the campaign when he was labeling them currency manipulators. What's your take on this?
I'm not a big fan of transactional approaches or issue linkage in dealing with these issues diplomatically. It does seem to be the modus operandi of the president as a former businessman. And we'll have to see whether it works. I think it did serve nicely to kind of get him off the hook in terms of not fulfilling a particular campaign promise that he made about naming China as a currency manipulator. But we'll have to see whether it really induces China to generate greater pressure on North Korea.
All right, indeed. Scott Snyder of the Council on Foreign Relations, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.